Still thawing out after trick-or-treating with the girls yesterday. Got a funny, somebody asked for the photo of my Nutcracker outfit. The girls were Sugar Plum Fairies, so that's up on my Instagram page, at Pete Mundo. You can see it there. Speaking of Ghostbusters, I got a great video on there as well of the girls dancing to Ghostbusters on the Instagram story. It's pretty funny. Chloe's really got the hip thrust going. Pretty good for a 2.5-year-old, so you can see it there. On a serious note, we got the Q3 GDP numbers. What does that mean for growth going forward? And also, Jerome Powell, Fed chairman, is doing his press conference today. So what will come out of that? Let's welcome on and say hi to Aaron Hedlund, chief economist at the Show Me Institute, Missouri-based think tank. He's on KCMO Talk Radio. All right, Aaron, let's start off with GDP numbers for the third quarter. What did we get out of that when they came out last week, and what does it signal for the economy going forward?
Hey there. Well, great to join you. Numbers came in what seems to be at a very strong level. It was 4.9% GDP growth, which the media has been making a hay out of, but actually the Federal Reserve has been tracking this and projecting that it was likely to come in around 5 for really multiple months now. So it's not a surprise, but it also doesn't really indicate much going forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm looking at the number and I'm saying, geez, I mean, credit card debt continues to skyrocket. Prices keep going up, yet GDP rose at a 5% annual rate. That tells me in part that we are addicted to consumer spending on frivolous items, and the Fed's going to have to keep pumping up rates. Am I wrong on that assessment, or do you think there's something else there?
I do think from the Fed perspective, you're going to hear a lot of language about rates staying higher for longer. And Wall Street has for a long time now been desperately pleading for rate cuts, but that's just not in the cards. But if you look at the GDP report, I think what you're seeing is that people were spending through the remainder of the pandemic savings that they built up from all the government stimulus. Consumer spending was kind of strong, but again, fueled by stimulus and debt. Going forward, the higher rates, the fact that people have now blown through almost all of that saving means that this is not going to be continued.
Okay, well, there is no real savings going on, right? I mean, if credit card debt's at an all-time high, then that tells me that people are not saving at the rates they were, and if they are, there's not nearly as much as there used to be.
Exactly. I mean, the saving is really just a hangover from all the government checks that were sent out. And so people's checking accounts got flush, and they've been gradually whittling that down. And we saw in the data that income growth was much lower than the previous quarter. So really what happened is people are just kind of blowing through the money. And as you pointed out, credit card debt is high as well. So the idea that this quarter being high growth means that next quarter is going to be high growth is completely false. I expect there to be a considerable slowdown in the fourth quarter and probably even slower than that going into the first quarter next year.
All right. So you're suggesting today that Jerome Powell is going to basically announce nothing, which means we are going to remain in this high interest rate environment for the foreseeable future.
That would be my expectation. I mean, he's not going to come out and say precisely what rates will be because there is this whole cottage industry surrounding Fed speak. But what I think you'll hear from him is that inflation is not where it needs to be. There's been progress, right? It's not 9%. It's more like 4%. But that's double still what the Fed's target is. So I imagine interest rates are going to be kind of where they are for a lot of even next year.
Mm-hmm. So Aaron Hedlund with the Show Me Institute's on KCMO Talk Radio. So, I mean, if you're the White House, I mean, are you doing cartwheels over this then? Excited about the fact that GDP is at 4.9%? I mean, I imagine they're going to spin this thing positively, even though every poll shows people are not optimistic about the economy.
I mean, there's no doubt they're going to try to seize the 24-hour news cycle and tout how awesome Bidenomics is. But the reality, when you see that 36% in one poll of people approve of the current economic policies, it's because incomes are down on an inflation-adjusted basis by $4,000 compared to 2019. Right. So when people look at how am I prospering, well, they're prospering less than they were before. Mm-hmm. And productivity is still lower now than it was a few years ago. And if you look at that GDP report, investment was also weak aside from inventories. So these are not the foundations of a strong economy going forward.
Now, what about the labor market? That remains pretty strong, right? It might not be as strong as it used to be, but the labor market's staying strong. So the Fed's trying to do this perfect balancing act of raising interest rates to suppress demand of goods, but not create a recession? How are they doing on that front?
Well, we're certainly not in recession territory yet from the GDP numbers, but again, a lot of headwinds. I mean, you have debt accruing, you also have student debt repayment resuming, which needs to happen, but that's certainly going to eat into consumer spending. And I think that's why you're seeing the Fed be a little bit more ambiguous about their language, to talk about, well, it depends on the data, it depends how things unfold, things evolve with a lag. I think that's just them saying we don't know exactly where it's going. But I think the key thing for them, the most important priority, is bringing inflation down. Mm-hmm. If they lose sight of that and they start to get gun shy because of a concern about recession, that's what got the Fed into trouble decades ago. When you take the eye off the ball of inflation, it then becomes that much harder to slay down the road.
Okay, so you're saying don't take the foot off the pedal, at least not anytime soon.
Exactly.
All right, good stuff. Aaron Hedlund, Show Me Institute, thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.